All right, you ready? Okay, just go ahead and get started. It's 5:45. We're going to start the Hudsonville Public Schools Board of Education Truth in Taxation hearing and work session for June 24, 2024. We have everybody here who's going to be here. We have Dr. Hooper and Mr. DeWitt are gone tonight. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Join me in that.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a motion to approve our agenda. Moved by Mark.
Support.
Don. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor say nay. Motion passes. Next up, recognition of visitors and hearing of people present.
One, Speaker Randy Weiss.
Good evening, friends. You can relax. I'm not going to be too aggressive here. Just want to share a few reflections. This morning I was driving on 32nd, approaching Hudsonville from the south, and the thing that struck me was this amazing structure with an eagle on one of its walls. For most of my life, I would drive past the high school, and my first thought often was, that is an ugly building. It is no longer that. Rather, it is a symbol of the vitality of what happens within the walls of its structure. I was honestly in awe. Allow us for a minute for our minds to wander back to graduation night. It was hot outside. The line wrapped around the front of the new gymnasium, down the eastern sidewalk, almost all the way to the freshman building, if you didn't walk that long walk. My in-laws were with us. They were in their late 80s. Standing at the southeast corner of the new arena, they contemplated walking to the back of the line. In that moment, someone involved with getting all of us into the building motioned for them to come to the doors. Let me just say that was a huge relief. I realized we were in capable hands. No, Kathy and I did not accompany them. We went to the back of the line. We still found our way into the arena. We ended up with fantastic seats, thanks to Doug's announcement that the back section of the floor seating was not reserved. If you were there, it was epic. After graduation, and after people started dispersing from the lawn, my graduate, Nadia, and I set out to find Dr. Vanderjack. We were not convinced the instant snapshot of the two of them when she crossed the stage was going to be good. We simply didn't know. We returned to the building in search of our super, but he was nowhere to be found. Yet we did find Mr. Beal. He was placing things from the event into storage, so we got a quick pic with my daughter and Mr. Beal, and it turned out great. When my daughter received a copy of her official picture with Dr. Vanderjack, it was perfect. For various reasons, I've been around leaders since I was very young. In 58 years, I've watched and learned and hoped to be a person of goodness in the fashion of the best of them. Honesty and deep integrity. Finally, I leave you with this. My recent graduate was mostly quiet in class throughout her years at HPS. She did not participate in many extracurricular activities here at Hudsonville. She is an excellent student. Not in the 4.0 club, but exceedingly close to it. She doesn't like to study, but she knows the importance of learning about her world. She has a deep curiosity about things and about people. A few days before graduation, my spouse asked our daughter what she would miss most about high school. She paused, but only briefly, and she responded with this: the teachers. Board, for all the negative things you hear from various stakeholders who'd like to be heard, if our teachers are what our graduates will remember most about HPS, we have wildly, wildly succeeded. I think of these words: "Oh, Captain, my Captain." And these are our professional educators. I'm so honored to have 3 graduates from HPS.
Great. Right, next up, Truth in Taxation budget hearing.
Thank you. So I have a couple people to thank before we get into the meat of the hearing. So just in particular, I want to thank people this year because there are just so many grants. I can't say enough, so many grants. At least 20 grants we've never had. And they're not all little, they're not all small, they're not all medium sized. It's taken a lot, it's taken a huge team effort. From Mandy and her department designing a new summer school program for special learners. Amy, her department, Kathy Lewandowski, just constantly redesigning and coming up with new programs that make a difference for kids. All that had to be staffed by Ann, the HR department. Leadership, we have a newer position we've needed for school this size actually for a while. Lindsay Polhouse in our grants position. It's like Lindsay was getting new grant award notifications weekly on things that the legislature came up with last summer. Stacy Johnson, the business office, looks over all the grants, does a fantastic job keeping things in order. Jody Martini, also in the business office, she moves staff salaries around all the time, along with Amy and payroll. Dr. Vanderjack, thank you for always keeping the kids at the forefront, keeping our focus there. It means it helps us a lot. And just board for your focus and dedication on leadership through the process and good conservative budgeting processes and helping us keep students at the front. I want to thank everyone. This has been an incredible year. This is my 28th year to do this, and it's very, very different. I'm glad it wasn't my first year. Thank you. So here's the agenda for the hearing. We'll go through these things. We'll spend a lot more time on the general fund budget than the others as we normally do. But just as a highlight, and this is in the packet, but I'm going to look here on the first major slide at, my cursor's not coming in, but the proposed revised budget column there. And I'll touch on a couple highlights. The biggest difference in the local line in revenue is just we had a lot more interest revenue than we originally budgeted. There's Stacy Johnson, the business office, has found a new way for us. It's called the investment portal, where we're investing in treasuries daily. It's fluid, and it's resulted in over $900,000 of additional revenue for the district. And that's just her work. I compliment Stacy on that. The state line, there's so many new grants. The biggest grants are the 31AA that was expanded this year. It's for meeting kids' needs, for social emotional development, as well as part of it we can use for safety and security. And then in the federal line, the biggest difference there from the original projection is we were able to spend more of this huge 11T grant, which is really ESSER 3. And then the other highlight down at the bottom, we received reimbursement this year, other financing uses down there and sources. We received funds this year from a FEMA grant that we worked on in 2001, reimbursement. We finally got the money, and we transferred those funds into a capital projects fund. So it's not in general fund, it's in a capital project, $440,000 to be used for the future capital project. Those are the highlights of the general fund revised budget. So flip it over here, that general fund column is in there again, but also we lay right beside it the proposed original budget for 24-25 fiscal year. And with conservative budgeting, we could budget more for local property tax revenues. We could be up to 10%. We budgeted 6.5%. And that'll likely be higher. Our state line is where we budget for students, our new student revenue. We budgeted 20 students below where we are right now, just for conservative budgeting also. We did bump the foundation allowance amount up by $241. That was the amount in the governor's budget, so we feel that's pretty we're pretty confident we'll get that money. The federal line, and the board has this, so I know it's small for the public, but the board has this in their packet, but the federal line is that change from 6.9 million to 2.9 million is back down to our normal level for federal grants. And the biggest changes are this huge ESSER 3 grant that we got, an appropriation from the state, some of the state's money, but that's a decrease along with the regular ESSER 3 was almost $500,000. So those are the highlights of revenue. In the basic programs line, there's actually a deduct, and we had, this year we reclassified some positions, but we also were able to downsize a little bit. The 5 to 6 sections, we didn't replace some teachers, just places where we're not really bumping up class sizes overall, but there's just places or sections we didn't need. So we took advantage of some of that. And then down in the other financing source use column, down there at the bottom, that big change there of 72%, it's really what we did last year. We're now back on a normal level. We don't have that FEMA grant transfer anymore. Onto this fund, we show it separately. This really is a subset of the general fund, but it's an activity that's in our general fund. This is WCET. Hudsonville is the fiduciary for WCET. This is their budget. The next fund, the building site sinking fund, in the 23-24 line, there's that land acquisition amount there. That's what we paid for the house on Allen Street. We've got funds available. We don't have anything right on the radar right now, but there's funds available if we needed to purchase another property for this year. The site improvement line, that's where if we had to do some parking lot work this year, we could do that. And then in the last line there, the building construction, renovations, improvements, is just to account for if we had a roof or a boiler in need of work. On the debt service fund, it's kind of exciting that you see here the proceeds from up in the revenues, proceeds from the school loan revolving fund. See that amount that was in 22-23 was 5.7 million. We bumped down to 2.48 this year, and next year we're projected to only borrow $1 million only. It's you're looking at big numbers that only is $1 million, but next year it looks like we're going to actually be repaying the fund. So that's a sign, or it could be another situation where we refund we lock the balance in and sell some bonds to do that. We've done that a couple times. So good news that we're paying back the fund. Over in this special revenue account, about 5 years ago, we were charged with taking our student activity accounts and actually putting them on the books. So this is statutory. We don't account for them during the year like this, but when you wrap them all together, that's like the student activity for elementary schools, high school. This is a summary of all those balances here. In a way, this is something our auditors need. Community Ed Fund. This is the Early Childhood Center, the programming that's there, their child care that's around the district, and the community ed programs that Rebecca Fabiano runs. So that program has rebounded really nicely after COVID, and it's quite healthy. So they're doing very well. This little fund, it doesn't work out for us statutorily and with the regulations to actually have our Early Childhood Center food service program run through Jenison Hudsonville, so we operate that ourselves. And the line down there, the excess of deficiency of revenues, or the revenues are really under expenses, that's a transfer from, what they do is they transfer funds in from basically what parents pay for daycare. That's how that works. To cover that balance. This is really small, but this is the Genesis Hudsonville. The board doesn't really take action on this. We got it here for information. But if you go to the second page, you'll see two lines, really, really small. Apologize for that. But there's a line in there for building in the 24-25 line. That's $1 million. That's the Genesis Hudsonville department planning to pay for the renovations to our central kitchen.
Just to clarify, not the entire, there's still part of the kitchen that not come out of it, correct?
Right.
The roof.
Just for the food service regulations, for some reason, a food service fund can't pay for a roof. So we're gonna pay for the roof. And then there's a line in there, you'll see down toward the bottom where it says equipment, $546,000. That's a reimbursement in this fiscal year. We already have the check where Genesis Hudsonville repaid, basically reimbursed our bond fund for the equipment, $486,000 for equipment that we put in the new high school cafeteria. This is one of the statutory portions of the hearing. We've got to talk about the tax rates and mention them specifically. So in the general fund, our operating fund, this 18 mils applies to the non-homestead properties. And this must be mentioned. That's the max we can levy by law anyways, 18 mils. Oops. The next category there is our building and site sinking fund millage. That applies to all properties in the district, and that's been heavily rolled back 1 year now. And so that's 0.9911 mils. And the debt service fund is also applied to all properties in the district. That is 7 mils. So that covers the highlights and a couple of statutory things. Are there any questions from the board?
In looking at the overall budgets, what percentage, for the most part, do you feel like you applied for the estimated budget for next year compared to the current budget for this year? I know it's not across the board going to be the same, but like a 2% increase on some of these, or was it line item by line item?
Good question. So 89 to 90% of our total budget is staff compensation. Then I just looked this up. So in the budget, $53 million is payroll directly. And so most staff are what's in this budget is a 4% raise for most staff. So, but you see that across the board.
Does that answer your question? Are you asking about utilities?
Well, that's kind of what I'm asking, but in the sense you answered it, because if 85 to 90% is related to staffing, then obviously any increase they get is going to average out to that. So yes.
Yeah. I didn't need to bump up utilities this year. I didn't feel I needed to. Don't know of any big rate increases coming. We've got cushion built in with the original budget. So if you look at the administration line, it pretty much comes out to 4%. Most of that category is staff. The amount we budgeted extra this year for health insurance is pretty low. That's one of those factors of that cap went up just a tiny little amount. I think they're a little low, but that's the amount we can pay for insurance is the amount of cap increase.
And then the only other question I had was on the building and site sinking fund, because of the Headley amendment, the decrease in the millage, is that also one of those funds that in the future we could ask for the number of years, and like we did with the May election, say, but if it gets smooshed down from the Headley, you still are going to levy 1 mil?
So the answer is yes. However, I think the impact by the Headley rollback on the sinking fund is not nearly as significant as the 18 mils towards the operational cost of the district. So you're basically taking a sinking fund in which the funds you can see as that continues to grow. Obviously during a healthy bond cycle, you hope you don't have to use your sinking fund, I would say, too much. But I don't think we're there. Now, if we had a 10-year sinking fund, which you could see that drop, but it went from 1 mil to 0.929.
Yeah.
If it drops to 0.8, that's a substantial change in that window. But the answer to your original question is, we could,
Technically,
but
yeah.
it's an extremely heavy lift to educate the difference between the amount and the Headley rollback,
Yeah.
as we'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned the investment portal, so that's the one. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
Our bankers, we meet at least quarterly, but we meet at least quarterly, usually no less than 6 months with our bankers, and we told them that we need a better vehicle to, number one, not have all of our funds in regular bank accounts and like on their balance sheet. So we've been looking for about 9 months for a better place, something that gives us more security. So we're not just having the FDIC backing, and something that's very portable, very liquid. So the product we use, literally, we've got daily availability, and we're invested in treasuries. It slides back and forth from our regular operating account into the bank account.
So it provides us some more frequent investment, more flexibility in terms of how we invest in treasuries than we have in the past.
Right. We used to have to take it. The prior vehicle was taking it all the way back out of our account, mailing a check, since we could wire it, going through MyLaugh, and now this just floats in and out of our operating account as we determine it. We've got daily availability. So it's actually invested in treasuries. It's a treasury fund, but it's the underlying investment in that fund is the treasury. So we've been getting just over 5%. Yeah, it's worked out very well.
The student activity accounts, PTC boosters.
So those accounts,
I know we talked about this
Right.
last time. So.
right? They actually hold their own bank accounts. We have that umbrella organization governance, but we help them buy their liability insurance. We file their tax return, but those funds are not in this. This is like the actual building student accounts for Jamestown Lower, Jamestown Upper. Yes.
But as part of our audit, those are audited, correct? If I remember right?
Yes.
Fund balance strong as a percentage. Historically, we have, whether we like it or not, the state of Michigan is still largely driven by, or significantly driven by the automotive industry and the status of the automotive industry. I've always targeted to keep healthy fund balance and to deal with those ups and downs in the automotive industry. So, just really appreciate the work on this financial good place there.
You see an increase in fund balance as we navigated some of the COVID dollars, and now we're long-term plan bringing it back so that we are, we definitely have work to do this coming year with the board, with the administration, with the staff regarding program evaluation, because we can't see this. We're not going to see this cliff at the end saying, okay, everything's gone. We want to evaluate what programs are needed for our kids. That's what we can do to continue to support the kids in our classroom will be a priority.
Ann Arbor is,
And they're not alone. I've received a few phone calls from other districts at the end of last week. They're not alone, and there's some struggling, and there's some other, I would say, non-public schools that are also struggling.
It's been a big piece of the staff, working for, as Doug said. He was working for the last 2 years to plan. We were able to move expenses, move positions into the grants to plan for, an extra year of running programs past the major funding. So it's been great. Feel good about the success of it.
And just to be clear, maybe more than another year. So we're not there to the point of saying just another year. We want to evaluate the programs to see what is needed in our classrooms to make sure our teachers are supported. I'd be remiss to not thank Mr. Briggs. So I know you're thanking everybody else, but thank you for your work on it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I just had the opportunity to spend a little over an hour with Pat this afternoon, and you were able to answer every question. I know Ken and Andrew spent a lot of time too, and so we're very impressed with the job. Both you and Dr. Van and the rest of the administration.
Great team. Thank you.
So if there are no further questions from the board, I would like to open up for public comment regarding the budget or the truth and taxation hearing. This is an additional public comment. We ask they be focused on the conversation that was just had. You do not have to sign up for this one. I will open the floor. You have 3 seconds to raise your hand if you'd like. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the board?
I'll just say y'all are awesome.
Yeah.
And reiterate, 28 years and y'all have constantly knocked this out of the park. So from the community perspective, I want to second what the board has said. Well done. Warms my heart to hear budget.
So I will ask that you state your name.
Oh, Aaron Boone.
Thank you. Only because this is truly a hearing of public comment. So,
Yes.
we just have to make sure we get that one as public comment.
Getting really close to banging this gavel.
I'm not going to start the timer unless you need more time. Anybody else? Anybody else with public comment? I think I moved to close public comment. The board will now take, not now, but in a few minutes, they'll take action on, and Mr. Briggs will report at that point what the action items are, but I'll turn back to you, Mr. Boltheis, to continue the board meeting.
Thanks again, Pat and team. It's fantastic work. Next up on the agenda, we have the approval of the consent agenda. So if I can have a motion for that.
so moved.
If I can. There's only a few of us tonight, so you're gonna.
Yeah.
Seconded by Mark. All those in favor say aye.
Are there any questions? Sorry.
Okay, any questions on the consent agenda? All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Now moving on to the regular action items. We'll go back to Mr. Briggs.
Sure. So the action is the 2003, we can just leave it right on here. The 2023, 2024 revised budget column with a net change, projected net change in fund balance of $140,635.
Can I have a motion to approve the 2023-24 budget revisions?
I'll move that.
It's by Mark, support by John. Any questions, thoughts? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes.
Thank you. Begin the 2024-25 budget with, we'll be a little more specific on this one, with over $105 million in revenues budgeted, $108 million of expenses budgeted for a beginning deficit of $2,866,640.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the 2024-25 original budget?
So moved.
Moved by Dawn, support by
Support.
Ken? Questions, thoughts?
Pat, can you elaborate perhaps for some, that year deficit, and you go, oh, deficit. Can you just elaborate on that, how that gap gets closed, please?
So we budget conservatively, and I expected the first run actually of this budget to be over a $5 million deficit, just with all the federal revenue and some of the state revenue that's expiring. And due to the planning, the positions that have been, say, rolled back up in the budget, that's some of the savings, so it's not as large as 5 million. Along with the conservative budgeting, as I said, in the 22-23 year, I'm trying to stay out of the weeds on this, but we have to be in compliance with the State Budgeting Act. We have to budget over line item by line. See the overage rate there, $1.5 million that we're over budgeting from actual. If we go below in any of those categories, you actually get a tough letter from the Department of Treasury. So because we have the budget over on these line items, we have, like in that year, we had a $1.7 million positive budget variance. And in revenues, it's the same way. If we set a budget for revenue, we can't be under by $1. So we have to be budget under what we actually think we're going to collect. So in that year, we actually had $1 million positive variance for that. So the two together was a $2.7 million budgeting variance. So if you look at that variance, that $3 million variance, it's easy to say it's going to be down by $1 million, more likely down by $2 million. So, and as I said, we plan to leverage the early COVID funding so that we could run programs longer, because it's really hard to ramp them up, to staff them, to get them going on the ground. So we're really, and Amy can speak more to this, but I feel like we're really moving in a positive direction this year. We need to run longer, and that was, the dollars came from the COVID money, and now we're spending that money that was in fund balance.
So when there may be a deficit on the budget, basically what we're saying is through management through the school year, through various accounts, we'll close that deficit.
So I also want to elaborate. The answer is yes to various, but it's also bringing us back to what we were before we were receiving all these federal dollars. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to manage the budget to get us back so that we are now doing the work we're doing with a consistent, reliable budget. I say that not knowing what the state is doing tomorrow with the state budget. But to your point of we relied on these federal dollars, we didn't want this to be a cliff. So we do have to bring us back to some reality, and we're going to see some of those growing pains over, we saw it increase, as you can see, from 21, 22, 22, 23, quickly. It disappeared quickly. We're going to make that last as long as we can, so that the deficit is not going to be a 1 year, we fix this, but going from Pat's point of expecting 5 million, now it's about 2.5, we can get it to 1, and we do that over the next couple of years. Now we're consistently working with a reliable budget from the state.
No, I understand. Yes, I understand. Again, I'm sensitive to folks hearing the word deficit and deficit spending, and and it's a manageable variance. It's a very manageable variance, and it level sets us back to some of the pre-COVID ESSER funds.
Yeah. I think
that's the key message.
I think if it takes us to, if we have a $1.7 million positive variance, that 18.6 will be 20.1.
And Ken and Mark all know, we've been at places where it's been really close to 10% fund balance.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at that in that perspective, it's like, okay, yes, that might change slightly, but we're a lot better off than we were 10 years ago.
Sure.
So.
And we have a lot of systems in place to support our kids, which is also something we're navigating.
$1 million plus budget. It's $2 million, it's 2%. It's less than 2%.
Which is-
It's easily manageable.
I think also our auditors suggested that we be down anyway, you know.
True.
So we're hitting that.
We are not a bank, to your
Right.
point. That's correct.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay, all those in favor of the approving the 2024-25 original budget, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. The third one. Mr. Briggs.
Once again, our tax rates of 18 mils for operations for the levied against non-homestead properties, 0.9911 mils for building site millage, that's levied against all properties, and the debt service millage of 7 mils levied against all properties.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the tax rates for summer of 2024?
So moved.
By Ken.
Support.
Support by Dawn. Any discussion on this one? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
That would have been interesting if you didn't pass.
I don't know what happens. So they play the game. You never know. Okay, now moving on to the discussion items. Staying over there in your corner, Mr. Briggs.
Yes, so our maintenance department, we need. We need a new tractor for, this will be used primarily at Mower. We're gonna do the, I'll just do the recommendation first. So it's a John Deere 1575T. We bought 2 of these last year, 37 horsepower. We're only asking for board authority to buy the tractor. I think we can do better. Our department thinks we can do better getting the attachments elsewhere. And it won't go over our limit we need for board approval. So this is a recommendation for $37,170. It's just very, very similar to the equipment we bought last year. Green Mark here, just on the corner, just in the Jennison. They gave us a really, really attractive, actually beat the MI deal pricing that's everybody could get of $40,208. They gave us a better price. They called their government price of $37,170. And they're right there. They've been good for service. And that's the recommendation from the department. Any questions on that?
So the pricing they gave us directly beats the contracted by the state price at the same facility.
It'd be phenomenal if we could get that price ourselves, but we can't. It's got to be a government.
Yep.
Individually, I mean, yes.
My yard's not big enough. I don't do that.
Still need somebody to cut it.
I love doing that. Doesn't need to take 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Any questions? Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Now the next high school world language courses.
Yeah, so
Taylor?
you have in your packet, attachment 4 is the listing of our world language courses that we offer. This is being presented as we've kind of gradually worked through all of the courses that we offer so that we have approval dates on the record that would align with board policy. And so we've broken it up into chunks. This evening you see our world language courses that we offer at the high school in particular. Some of them have some dates of approval, but most of them do not. So just asking for, this will come as a formal action item at our next board meeting, but just for discussion here this evening.
I'm surprised that how few actually have dates on them. You know, a lot of them been around for a long time.
They have.
Guess that's probably why they weren't paying attention way back then.
Ah, come on. Way back then.
Hey, I think I'm in that category now too. Okay. No questions, thoughts? All right.
These are all courses that we're either teaching or we will be teaching.
Yes, yes. Some of them at varying degrees and some not all trimesters, depending on certain enrollment. But yes, these are courses that we offer for students to enroll.
I'm not surprised with Miss Mandarin. I never known about the teacher in China.
And I'm sure it was board approved when.
Yeah, I know.
We just don't have a date on these, to be clear. None of these are new courses or content areas.
Right.
All right, I'm sure we'll circle back around on them. Camera bid purchase recommendation.
Yes, I'm going to highlight some things, and then Mr. Smucker is here, our technology director, to chime in when I get too far over my skis. So you either give me a signal, Jeff, or however you want to handle it. So the review report, just to cue this up, we've been working for, Jeff, it's been at least 3 years to outfit the rest of our fleet. We started a project 5 years ago, six years ago, to have our cameras record and then wirelessly upload when they come into the bus garage. And when it works, it's a beautiful thing. And that key is just when. It's just it's just flaky. There's too much going on there. And so Jeff's working, and our transportation director, Rob's been working to find a more stable solution. Some of it is in the wiring quality, and just knowing how to wire a bus. And they've actually worked out better ways to store video on the buses. This is not all about buses, but it's a big piece of it. And they've engineered better solutions, along with our technology partner, Communications by Design. The rest of this covers filling in the gaps where we don't have video camera, surveillance camera, security, best word is security camera coverage in our elementary schools. So this fills both those gaps. The bid tabulation, you flip to the next page, you'll see there where we're recommending that Hillard be the vendor to do the low voltage cabling in the buildings. They're also we're recommending them to be the contractor to do the work in the camera work in the buildings. There's a big piece, it's a lot of work. Wiring the buses is really, really tough. So we're asking, we're going to ask in the future for your approval for that. And I'm just going to follow Hillard along there. We call it, you've seen voluntary alternates, but this is a mandatory alternate. We forced all the bidders to bid the cabling and cameras to add the sports complex into this. We need that. That's something we need, security cameras out there. And then Moss has been a long-term vendor for us. They did the networking work on the current buses, and they really understand that well. And they gave us they're actually the only one that gave us a bid to do the networking on the buses. And I clarified this, Jeff, please jump in, but it's not just networking, it's not just labor. They're actually providing a little server, a little video server on each of the buses. So I know you don't have a mic, Jeff, but what did I miss?
You did well.
I did well.
Yeah. As
You're
you
too kind.
always do.
You're too kind. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight?
Not really. I mean, we think the solution that they come up with for the buses is going to be a better solution, and it's in place in a couple other places, a couple other districts in the area, and it's done well. Technology improves as we go along, and bus video is one area that if we dived in 5 years ago, it was pretty new what we were trying to do, and it's gotten better along the way.
So with any of these systems, is any of this viewed real time, or is it for the most part to go back to see what occurred?
B.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's now, with the new capability we have, just wireless doesn't always upload the first time. And so there's actually a way to, in the old days, we used to have to pull a drive, but there's a way actually to link in through the network to link directly to the bus wirelessly, which is easier than the bus uploading to the servers over in the tech department and then getting in there. So it gives us, with these little video servers on here, it'll store a lot more video, many more days. Because now if it just tries to upload, never uploads, we lose it. It writes over the little SD card.
So Moses will handle the network, Hilliard will handle all the hardware. You said cabling will be separate? Did I do that right?
Cabling on the buses will be done, cabling and camera install on the buses will be done by Hillard. Moss will handle this video server and connecting everything.
So the actual wiring will be handled by Hillard as well?
Correct.
Is this part of this bid?
Yes.
Okay, I understood. Okay, thanks. Thanks, John.
And this will be paid. We've got some of this, a small portion will be bond. Most of it will be paid for out of the new, we've got the state grants.
When we buy new buses, do they come outfitted with technology, with cameras and/or other technology? I'm guessing we're not doing anything on this, right? No,
They
so
don't.
it's an add-on for any.
They don't know. Yeah.
But they do understand the specs that we're looking at when we purchase buses. So that conversation does happen where we don't buy a bus that we can't retrofit what we need to get it done.
They are putting more cameras on exterior. They're coming with exterior cameras, right? Like
Yeah.
for stop signs. And
Yes.
Part of that's based on the law.
And with Jeff's leadership, along with Rob and our transportation department, Rob Matthews and our transportation department, we have some principals that are just excellent. I mean, they're all using it, but some of them will go get on the server. They hear about something from the students during the day. They'll go investigate. So transportation doesn't really have to get into it. They'll just call up and say, hey, this happened and this is something, some can be disciplined, or it can be anything, but we've got a couple principals that are really doing a nice job, and so the principal can actually look at the video from their desk.
How many people have access to this video?
Principals,
Okay.
it's really, we restrict it, yeah.
And then how long is the tape kept on file?
30 days
Okay, and it just automatically
overwrites.
is it a law?
It's policy.
Okay.
It's not a tape.
Okay.
Only the only reason I say it because I said the same thing. Like it's not a tape.
I know what you meant.
And back to your point, John, about live feed. I envision the movie Speed, right? When there's something going on, they want to stream. This is normally used for our administration when there's situations that take place on a bus and they want to investigate, because quite often the story that might go home might be different than what transpired on the bus, both audio and visual, right? So they can hear it too, and that can impact some decisions that are made about students' discipline.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Probably staying over by you for the food service building renovation bid recommendations.
Yes. So the first page, there's a summary there of the vendors that we're recommending. For the total requested approvals will be $703,090. And then if you turn to the bid tab, there's a story here. So some of them are really simple. We did get for a project this size, very high participation. Advanced Excavating from Hudsonville, really no brainer there. They're low bidder, and They've done great work for us for years. Over to the concrete category, Burgess is low bidder. Again, they've done great work for us for years, so that's our recommendation. Category 3, metals. The Bennett Steel, I've not worked with them. I don't know if they've done work in Hudsonville, but OAK's done a lot of work with them. The reason they're in the green there as the recommended bidder is the 4 bidders that were lower than them forgot a piece. And so we went back to them and allowed them to cure their bid, and they're like, no, I don't want to eat that cost. So Bennett's the recommendation.
You said OAK does have experience.
Yes. Yep. They like to work with them. Interesting thing, this has not happened in my career. Category 4, we had a tie. And so it took quite a while to sort out, but Great Lakes has done quite a bit of work. Versatile, they both have done a lot of work for the district, fine work. But there was one of the pieces we got into where the voluntary alternate for Versatile to remove layers, they didn't. They had it as a cost, and Great Lakes has it in their base bid. So we deemed them to be the low bidder. And I say most of this work, Dan Rathburn, the project manager for OAK, does most of the pre-bids and bid screening. That was Dan's idea. It's a great one. Category 5, we're sole sourcing our controls, so ControlNet is our recommendation. 6, DHE does a lot of good work for the school. Long-term successful bidder. Electrical, Grand Valley we deemed them to be the low bidder because a couple other the lower 2 didn't meet all the specs. And I do need to point out, as Dr. Vanderjack pointed out during the hearing, the roofing part will be paid for by Hudsonville. Our recommendation is to fund that because it's sinking fund eligible. To fund that from the sinking, pay for that from the sinking fund. The rest of the project will be reimbursed by the Genesee Hudsonville Food Service Department.
Oh, that's a good question. I almost said, okay, but I don't know. I didn't mean it that way. I don't know. I do know that, that if you think about this entire process, at the end of the day, this building still resides on our property, and it'll be a nice improvement to our food service. For those that had a chance to look at it, as we were talking about this process maybe a month or so ago, you could tell it needs a little bit of a pick-me-up.
No, that was a question.
No, I know. I don't know. I didn't know the answer. I don't think so. Now that
What's the timeline on this
Yes.
build out?
So, good question. Because it's not in the summer timeline for schools, it's going to kick off right about the start of school. It's going to need a lot of coordination with the department, but they assured us that they have several contingency plans to not only produce food, if they need to produce it somewhere else, but that they can work around the construction to do the work right there.
the biggest challenge is getting into the building because of where the construction is taking place. There's one door in the back that is just, they're affecting the main transportation areas for getting food out, but they're confident they can get it done.
Yep. But it'll kick off right about the start of school. We'll be able to get, I think we'll be able to do a little dirt work before that, but the main building stuff, main building work, rebuilding a freezer, and rebuilding the loading dock will be right while we're producing, right while school starts. And that helped us a lot for bid pricing.
Where if we wait until next summer, prices would have been a lot higher.
Or even tried to do it this summer.
Okay.
It's always a challenge to do work over the summer when everybody's doing their work. You find time in September, October, they're like, perfect, it's a little bit downtime. Assuming the board does approve this July 11th. But yes, that would be our next.
Good point.
Yes,
Good point.
we still have to ask you to approve it in July.
Yep.
But as you remember, our goal behind all of these bids the last several years has been to bring this to the work session and then come to the board for approval so we can have discussion and try to address these needs if needed prior to asking for board approval.
Yeah, they think they can do it. I trust Mary and the team over there. Anything else on this one? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Take a deep breath now.
All right.
We'll get done.
Now I'm going to ask the board, I mean, if you can, Amy's going to pass these out, but, oh, thank you. I'm going to shift gears to Title IX. There are the new regulations that came out from the federal government for 2024 that go into effect on August 1 of 2024. There are roughly 1,600 pages of regulations that are then broken down to a 26-page policy that I will bring to the board as a first reading. I would love to tell you that I have all those recommendations to discuss tonight. There's still a lot of work that has to be done. To be clear, there are 23 states in the country that have already filed suit against the Title IX regulations, and they have won, so they're in what they call a stay regarding the Title IX regulations. Michigan is not one of them. Our neighbors are. Ohio, Kentucky, they are, which is fine. We have our own, we have to move forward as if these go into place on August 1. I gave the board a one-page, and I highlighted some components that I would like you to just read through, not right now, I mean you can if you want, but I want you to wrap your mind around some of the challenges that we're trying to navigate as we implement this. So I want to also reference, we have policy that's in place that still is in effect after August 1 if an event occurred prior to August 1. So let's just say something happens on the East Coast trip, summer science, the end of school year, and the student reports it when they come back to school. We still have to address it, but based on our old guidelines and policies. So we have, I will bring to the board 2 changes to policy that we still have to have in place. And I'll also bring to the board a new policy and guidelines. So the board will hopefully approve the changes to the old and a new one, and then we have to address the administrative guidelines because that's not the board's job. You set policy, then we fix our guidelines, if you recall how that works. So when we do this with the Title IX, you'll see some of the changes that are required. It really changes the definition of sex discrimination. It does impact athletics. A lot of the, oh, you can leave that on, I'm just not ready to use it. A lot of the changes to Title IX, I'll be very transparent, are post-secondary education. So there's a lot of conversation about, I'll say, hiring practices, that a lot of those have to do about classes that students can take, about pregnancy that we have, that I'm not saying we don't, but a lot of these are based on post-secondary changes. So these are things that we have to do. In the past, we've had 2 coordinators. We've had a male and female. It was Mr. Petrolia and Mrs. Bernard were our 2 Title IX coordinators. They were not decision makers. Those went up to Ann Armstrong. But now we can have one that does all of it, if you will. So we're trying to navigate what is the best course of action for us. We have definition of staff, then we have definition of, what's the term? I want to say, hold on. Confidential employees. From a legal standpoint, they're not recommended we have confidential employees because all employees should be treated the same when it comes to dealing with from a pre-K-12 system. But you might have confidential employees when it goes to post-secondary. So there are language in there that we're not going to recommend. There are language in there that we would recommend goes through the superintendent, but some might go through the board if it has to do with the superintendent. I've spent about, I would say 4 or 5 hours on Saturday, 4 or 5 hours on Sunday, and I'm almost through with the one policy. It's heavy. But I need to meet with our coordinators. I need to meet with Mrs. Armstrong because of her previous role. We're trying to navigate 2 different policies. And all the boards are doing this as we speak to try to get this done. I will be recommending to the board the policy at our next board meeting in July as a first reading, and then in August as hopefully a second reading and approval. If we need to have an additional meeting, I think I put that in board briefs already, and we might have to have an additional meeting. I am not as concerned about an event that takes place on August 1 through our first board meeting in August, because students just start to come back and there is a 30-day window to investigate. We have time. So I'm not saying we have to get this done on July 31 because something could happen on August 1. If, heaven forbid, something does happen on August 1, we still have time to do a second reading of policy and go from there. I just gave you a 2-page highlight to give you kind of an overview of what I just shared. Are there questions on that? Because I'm not done with the policy conversation, but are there questions on the direction of the Title IX policy?
So, do you know if there's ongoing litigation in Michigan that may end up having a preliminary injunction filed?
The answer is yes, and it's the same argument that the other states have had regarding that OCR has overstepped their bounds to do this, and the definitions have become too broad from their standpoint. The answer is yes, and as of 5:30 this afternoon, I have not received any updates. I've been through 3 webinars regarding Title IX. The last one that started 5 minutes before it started, changes just came out to some of it was through Neola, so some of the states that they govern. So it could very well change. I don't think it should change the work we do to prepare for policy change. I also firmly believe that as a school district, it is our job to protect our kids, period. How we define that, the conversation about locker rooms and bathrooms and sports and all of those are things that we navigate as an administration and as a board. But I think at the end of the day, our job is to protect our kids, and that means all of our kids. So I think we still want to do this work if there is an injunction. I would not be surprised if there is in Michigan. However, I would not also be surprised if it is, and then come September 12, they say, okay, we're done, it's lifted, get it done right now, and I think we should be prepared to move forward to this point. And I think there's a lot of good work in here. They've streamlined a lot. They've given us an opportunity to actually say that we can be the decision maker and the investigator, whoever is our Title IX coordinator. They can have an assistant because of our size. I recommend that we have an assistant, but we want to make sure it's not, I want to say the right people, but in the right positions to be able to do this work. It's important work. We've had several, I would say, on a weekly basis, we probably have 1 or 2 or 3 Title IX investigations that take place throughout the district for various reasons. Major ones are brought to the board, and we have discussions on those. To some degree, some people argue they're all major, but I think there are some that are that can be dealt with internally. Go from there. There's conversations about the appeal process that looks substantially different. The request for asking questions to each party can ask questions to the other, and the coordinator can decide whether or not they want to ask these questions to the other and go from there. So that was a long way of answering your question that there's still time, and I would not be surprised even on July 31. Sorry, can I remember? July 31, if there is something that goes into effect. Because I will also tell you that by this law, every staff member is required to be trained with the Title IX regulations. We can do that when school comes back, but we hire a new teacher in October. They have to be trained when they start right away. It's not hey, next summer we're going to do it again type deal. So we have to go through training. We're working, we use a program to train our staff, not just on, hey, have you read the policy, but an actual training module. that we go through, or we call them GCN trainings or Global Compliance Network trainings that all of our staff go through. I go through them every year. Sometimes we have to take one on ladder safety, but otherwise, I take them on bloodborne pathogens, first aid, and Title IX would be required every year, every 3 years for staff to go through, but initially everybody has to be trained. So working through those components is something I think, even if there is a stay, I think we want to continue to work.
And I agree with that. I guess I'm just hoping that Neola also has an alternative options for language. If you end up with a stay and then it goes on to the next level of appeal and it gets to the Supreme Court and they say, okay, some of this language no longer is required, that's somewhere at Neola, since that's who we pay to do this, has thought ahead to that to say, okay, but here's the sections of the language that appear to be still in litigation.
Yeah.
And therefore, these are the items that, yes, right now we have to, but if this gets to the Supreme Court and it's decided that these specific paraphrases or words no longer are required, we don't have to redo all of this work again to get back to what's required versus chosen, I guess you could say.
I 100% agree, and you're leading into the next part of my conversation that I'm going to touch on in a minute. But I think that's part of the addressing some changes to the 2020 regulations policies. That way, we have a policy already. I think we need to address that one also, because that will be what would remain in effect. The change, the 26 pages of the new Title IX policy is broken up into components that I believe there are components that can be changed out based on what comes out of any staying going from there.
Okay.
Which leads me, are there any other specific questions? And if there are, please ask. And this is going to be a heavy conversation because it's big. Dorothy's like, you're still reading that policy? I'm like, it's heavy to try to put people in place and just to make sure we have the right processes to protect our kids. Which leads me to my second conversation that I would like to have. I would really like to explore potentially navigating away from Neola for our policy, who oversee our policies. Over the past 4 years, there have been other organizations that have begun to do policy work. Miller Johnson started doing it. Clark Hill actually started doing it. They were bought out by Miller Johnson, and so Miller Johnson was doing this work. Troon started doing this work in collaboration with Michigan Association of School Boards. If you remember, some of you might, years ago, MASB did this work under policy, and every time there was a policy change, you would have to reach out to them with your attorney. You would have to be the one as a district to say, hey, we heard this policy change. They would charge you to rewrite the policy, and you go from there. Now Troon is doing this work for policies. We have some of our neighboring districts that have explored this opportunity. Some have transitioned to using Troon. More districts are looking into it. It is a heavy lift to change policy carrier. I'm pretty sure Mr. Davis, Mrs. Sneeden, Mr. Hall, I know it's a heavy lift. I did the transition in my former district. When I came here, I was glad that you already had made the transition, but it's a lot of work to still stay up on policies. I would like to explore the idea of moving to looking at Troon. It would be a 2024-25, probably an entire school year transition in which the board would approve policies that would go into effect most likely July 1 of 2025. The nice thing about if we go with somebody like Troon, they are what we primarily use for our legal services. We do have others that we use based on whether it's purchasing of property or whether it's could be a major staff issue that is assigned by our insurance carrier with a different legal firm. But then every time we have a conversation with our attorney, they don't have to say, hey, let me take a half an hour and look up your policy. They wrote the policy, so they know what it looks like. There's some consistency. It does streamline our policies from roughly 260 to maybe 110, because if you look at Neola, there are parallel policies with staff, support staff, and students. And instead of doing that 3 times, they do it once. So that eliminates 120 policies right there. There are some policies that we will probably have to create on our own because we've had them, we expect them, and that's where we are. So I'm teeing it up tonight because I knew the Title IX conversation could lead into that. There's a district nearby that is transitioning to Troon right kind of now in this time frame, and I have a great relationship with the superintendent. Somebody that will give me honest feedback about that transition, what it looks like. I've talked to others, and they said, it's been great. And then I said, tell me more. And they're like, well, I'm not dealing with it. Somebody else is dealing with it. So I want to talk to somebody that's actually dealing with it, like boots on the ground, to say, here's what it looks like. Here's the support we're receiving, and going from there. So I'm looking for some feedback. I know it might not surprise some of you that have been around that this ebbs and flows, and there's somebody, to your point, Dawn, I'm sorry to cut you off, but to your point, Neola's investment is into multiple states. The O in Neola stands for Ohio, and there's no M in Neola. I know they take care of Michigan, but there is something to be said about Troon being in your state. They're well aware on the legal issues that are taking place, and that would be, I simply want to explore. I don't know the cost, I don't know the time, but if you said, nope, we love where we are, we are caught up on policies. I think when I got here, we were a few years behind. The board has done a great job of looking at policies, first reading, second reading. We've had a couple. We have our third reading. I think we've had a good practice in place for implementing policy. But truly, this work is one of your jobs is to set policy. So I would love feedback on what your thoughts are.
We see more efficiency with Troon, Michigan-based, legal provider, et cetera. So we see efficiency, maybe a little, what I'm hearing is more that, maybe a little, not dissatisfaction, but it's like, it does what they do across a number of different states, based in Ohio, probably 100% blah, blah, blah. So a little bit of dissatisfaction there, a lot of efficiency, potentially.
Yeah, I can't say there's dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
I can say that we're receiving a lot of generic language like every other district is,
Yeah.
and I would love to receive Michigan-focused language.
That's right.
I can't complain. We've got great service from the staff that come here to meet with Robin and I and go through policies. Robin's learned their system with board docs of editing and going from there. We've been able to provide the board with the additional language, stricken language, those type of things. So the process, I think we've got it down. And the new process might be worse. I don't know, but something, I don't know.
Did you just look at Troon, or did you take
Based on the feedback, I would just look at Troon. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I'm not particularly fussy about it. Just want whoever can keep us on the right side of the law.
Yeah.
And then if they messed up a policy, would Troon take some responsibility for this?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that you do when you sign an agreement. We have it with Neola also.
Yeah.
If the policy, they stand behind legally their policies. That would be my expectation.
Yeah, that'd be more.
Yeah. And again, we'll probably, this is one of those requests that I would have to really have a subcommittee of the whole entire, because that's a heavy lift. And I know at least one person would love to be on that subcommittee to look at policy. Going from there.
Now look at me.
So I would like some, is that okay for me to at least
Certainly.
explain?
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as you gather the information, like you said, about cost and what it actually looks like from people who have experienced it,
Yeah.
that's going to be valuable info too.
So I'll have, I should have more information on that, most likely even at our July meeting, because I will start doing some digging. Now's a good time of year to do that work.
And I'm sorry, I know you said it, but just so I have that correct, you're going to get us some more information before the first reading, the masses of pages of the updated policies and the new policy.
Yeah, I was going to give you the 1,566 pages of, no, there's a 26-page policy that I still want to get to the board so that you can review it and see the recommendations we have for selections and what we're not selecting. Several of them have like 3 options, what option we've selected, and I want the board to be able to look through that And if you need context to why we selected that, all I'm saying is at our July meeting, there might be a lot of discussion around it, not just we've already discussed this, here's the recommendation, first reading. We'll need to discuss it in detail on the 11th. Does that answer your question, Don?
Yes.
Okay.
And you're also stating, Dr. Bandyjack, that no matter which way the courts go this summer before they come up with a final determination, it's still worthwhile and almost necessary to continue to get ready.
I think it doesn't hurt for all of us to get educated on what the expectations are. If we have a first read on July 11 and it's approved, and then come August 1, there's a stay, I don't have to bring it for a second reading. We can table it until we do bring it for a second reading. And there could be, at that point, there'd be a second reading with maybe changes, and then a third reading. And that could be, if it goes all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, it could be 18 months from now.
Mm.
Yeah.
It makes sense how far it's going to go legally. Supreme Court.
So it depends on who you ask, because if you look at some of the lawsuits that have been filed, you have some groups that are neighboring each other, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, they're all together. But then you also have Kansas, Oklahoma, Washington, Alaska. And they're not, those are, geographically, they're not right next to each other. So, but I do think the narrative, because they're all very similar lawsuits, because they're so similar, it's almost like there's a common theme, and who else is going to jump on board? Now, a lot of it also has to do with politics
And the election.
and the election. So I don't know, but I think we stay out of that and we do the work and see what it looks like.
Is the common theme overreach?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I think
Overgeneralization and overreach. I think it's both.
I think the board had received an email from a constituent on, let's see, what date was that? On June 18, doing a cut and paste of an article from the Associated Press about it. And in there, it does talk about the things that the judge said was overreach. Mm-hmm. So if you didn't get that email or didn't know whether you should read it, I think that would be helpful for you to see where things stand. And again, that was on June 18.
I watched a webinar that I think I can send you to look at. I don't know. It's not mine, but I think I can. Maybe I'll send that to you. I referenced it in my update Friday.
Okay.
Maybe I can send that. It's about 45 minutes if you watch it at regular speed.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, it was just kind of an overview. In my opinion, it kind of summarized some of this.
Yeah.
Going from there. So if you have a chance to look at it, I'll send it to you at the end of the week.
And just so I'm clear too, I mean, this, from the little bit that I have understood of the things that are going on, there's going to be changes to how we would staff our department. So right now it's been Mike and Melissa who have kind of been the boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. That gets consolidated into one.
It doesn't
position?
have to.
Okay.
I mean, the difference is you had to have Mike and Melissa. We had to have two people. We were recommended to have two people as coordinators. However, then there was, as investigators. But then you have coordinators and decision makers. So now they can be the same person. So what was happening, you'd get two people involved to investigate, and then you had a decision maker, and then there was a different person that would be the person they would appeal to. So you'd have Mike and Melissa do the investigation. One might take the lead or the other based on the gender, the grade level, several factors, and would be the decision maker, and then I would be in case there was an appeal. So I couldn't be involved in any of the conversations, and traditionally it would be hey, run this past the superintendent so he's aware of what's going on. And then they can't. Because if there's an appeal, it goes to me, and I can't have made a decision already before the appeal gets to me. So that allows it to streamline. My recommendation would be we have one coordinator, and that coordinator could have an assistant based on the size of our district.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's a lot that goes on, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
That both Mike and Melissa have to do on a weekly basis. So
yeah.
That goes to one person. That's a lot.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But those decisions, I mean, there's just so many decisions. And then there's sections in here that I'm going to highlight, quite frankly, and say, as the board, we need to discuss this because I don't have a good answer for the recommendation. Traditionally, I would have a recommendation for all of them. There's some sections I don't know. We got to talk about it. So, just being honest.
All right. Thanks for spending all that time this weekend reading that.
Yep, it rained up north, which
Yes,
was great.
it did.
Okay, any other convo on that right now? Okay. Next up, we have the superintendent goal review.
Thank you. So I will go through. I'd like to go through kind of an update where I am mid-year with my goals, and I'm going to try to do this the best I can from a technology standpoint. That I think I have it figured out. Okay. So I had 5 goals that were set forth with the board. We set these in January. I took some feedback and made a couple modifications. And these are, just a reminder, these are for the 24 calendar year. So I really just mentioned another goal was to maybe look at a different firm to do our policies. That doesn't mean there are things that the board will recommend. Hey, you know what? We really want you to focus on this or work on this. There could be other things like, you know what? Thanks for having that a goal, but you just move on. We're done. So this is still a living, breathing document going from there. So I'm going to go through each goal. These are the goals that were set. This is how it was laid out, and I'll talk about each goal and then go from there. So the first goal that I had to do around testing and the methods, and the primary reason for this goal was because a lot of the testing components were moved to a completely online environment. We've had a lot of conversations about what is the noise behind the controllables that we have when it comes to student testing and uncontrollables. So are we having issues with online access? Kids aren't used to using a certain computer. You know, all of them have Mac computers, and we give them a PC at the end of for testing. They're like, I'm not used to using this. They don't use a mouse, those kind of things. So we had a lot of conversations about that, and then how to really dive into the data. So this is just how the goal was laid out. So here's an update on where I would say that as a district, when I say I'm going to say these are my goals because I'm the only one that you evaluate, but these are really district goals that our team, and I will take pride in the support that I receive from Amy and Mandy and Pat and Ann and quite frankly all the administrators, Robin, that really help work through a lot of these goals. So a lot of in-depth analysis on the data, focused on SAT at the high school, the MSTEP and STAR data. We started using a lot more with AI tools because not only are our kids using AI, but we're helping staff utilize AI, which has been instrumental. Amy's done a lot of work also when it comes to taking a lot of feedback and putting it into AI to generate summaries of things that we can focus on and where weaknesses and strengths are. Collaborating a lot with building principals, grade level chairs. I've had several meetings with building principals, working with Lindsay Volhaus, Craig Steenstra, Amy Taylor, Kathy Lewandowski, and working really digging into the data a little bit more. We have comprehensive evaluation of our assessment data in the fall, so we start to get more feedback from our MSTEP data in the fall, and then it'll help us to really dive into those results and go from there. We want to continue to refine our strategies, align. I'm not going to read all these, but that's kind of where we are with our testing methods. We've also talked a lot about the amount of testing that's taking place, and is it test exhaustion for students, or is it teachers need like time to teach and not time to assess all the time? So we're having those conversations about what that looks like. So when I put on here also resources needed, I want to be clear that these are not resources that I'm asking for, and I don't feel the board is supporting them. These are just things in my mind that what might be needed moving forward that I might not know about. And I would say most of these things are things that, okay, we can do these things, those are things that were coming to mind when I'm thinking about what resources do we need to continue this work. So continued PD when it comes to AI, that is ever evolving and going from there, which is great. And data analytics, that I'm going to talk about in a second. And then enhancement data system. So we have PowerSchool, and we are integrating PowerSchool now with Unified Insights, which is led by the work, I think Kathy and Sarah Woodring, thank you, presented some of that Unified Insights of bringing all that stuff together, which allows us to bring also our behavioral data into that conversation. some of the Swiss data we have. Primarily, it's more robust, I would say, at the elementary level. So bring that all together and say, how can we use this? How can we use this tool? So we have integrated that, but we need to be able to utilize it. We have not, I don't think we've begun to explore how helpful that can be, particularly when it comes to some of the MTSS work that we're doing. So then, that was an update, and then there were some questions that were posed by the board, and I don't know who posed the questions, so I'm going to just put them all out there, and I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about this, each one, and I might ask for clarification if it's not your goal and you want to, or not your question, and you're like, this is what I understand it. I'll go from there. Any initial insights from the data this spring that will driving discussions for the fall. So, with our district improvement team, we reviewed STAR data. First through 8th graders, we look at pass-fail rates and semester requests at the high school level, the dialogue with our leaders in the fall as they work to set building-specific goals. So we take the data, and then they also, as a building, have specific data. Are there buildings that there are areas that we want them to focus on? The answer is yes, and the principals are doing that work because they are seeing their data. Some of our other key data, if you get to question number 2, are we identifying a grade level school subject-specific areas that need more immediate attention? I'm going to say yes, but I'm not going to share that here, if that makes sense. But I will generally tell you there are some buildings that they are working also, we're supporting them, but there are also grade levels, and one of our initial concerns was, what does that transition look like from 5th to 6th grade? And that's been a standard concern of ours. However, now we have a 5-6 building. So is it a 4th to 5th question? Is it a 6th to 7th on the north end? So we've added another layer to find out, is there a transition concern, or is it a content area? So are there standards that maybe are not taught to our expectations at certain areas, and how are they assessed? So the answer is yes, and I think we've honed in on that through a lot of the work, not only that Amy's doing, but that our principals are doing going from there. We recently identified a new math curriculum at the elementary with Bridges. How is the evaluation of our elementary reading? So that's always ongoing, just to be clear. So we are always evaluating. We do not focus on math, so we can ignore ELA. At the same time, even though we're not assessing science and social studies in every grade level, we're doing that work also. There is an ELA. An ELA committee, you remember at our last presentation, they talked about reading and about math when Kathy went and showed the charts about how we're doing. So that evaluation of the program continues with all of our elementary, particularly, and then the work through MTSS, our intervention programming, the district improvement process, the pre-K through 12 ELA committee work. So there are committees for each one of our content areas, and the ELA committee continues to do their work and dive into it deeper, even though the math committee is the one that maybe has spent the most money this year. That's one way to look at it. That makes some sense. With teacher administrative evaluation law changes earlier this year and placing less emphasis on student growth and assessment data, how do you see this affecting your goal? And then I'll look at 5, how do you anticipate the evaluation change to impact future goals? So I'm gonna put those together and say there is no correlation between assessment and evaluation. And here's why. It has been a flawed system since the beginning because it's not reliable data towards an evaluation. Your evaluation is based on and I'm not going to say mine is based on a calendar year, which is different. But if you think about a teacher's evaluation, it is for a calendar year, which for them would have been 23 to 24. Their evaluation is due by the end of June 30th of the school year, and the data is not released and tied to the teacher until the fall. So if you look at the system, it's always been flawed because you're getting the data a year after. So you're taking a teacher's evaluation data in the fall, and if you base it on their evaluation, it would be for the year in which they didn't even have those kids, if that makes sense. So there is no correlation besides the only comment I would make is this work is important to do regardless of the ties to evaluation. Student assessment and the impact it has on learning is, to me, the number one priority of our school system. Curriculum is the number one thing we do with our kids, with all due respect to the rest of everybody else's work. But this is a priority to preparing our kids. So there are no correlations. With my evaluation, there are changes, with my evaluation, which we're going to go through the rate of reliability when we get into our August meeting. But with that, there is the correlation to me is more based on STAR data, which would be local, and you can look at true growth. When you assess students in the fall, winter, and spring, you can see growth targets and you can see progression of a student during that school year. If you do it once a year, you're a year off, if that makes sense. Any questions on this goal? I'm not trying to go too fast, but I also don't want to. Okay, goal number 2. Share pertinent information. Sorry. Get feedback from other constituents. This was the goal. You can see I put a plan in there to accomplish that goal. There's also a timeline to accomplish that goal. Going from there. I would say that the biggest issue with this goal, the biggest component was the non-homestead change and make sure that was shared. That's a major shift, as we talked about a little bit earlier, going from a 4-year with a 2-year Headley, going to a 4-year non-homestead with a 2-year 2-mill Headley rollback. It's always good to get other feedback and other meetings. I did not schedule community meetings in homes. I processed doing that with our principals. And the idea was that when I did that during the bond proposal in 2019, it was very beneficial because it was my first year and a half, and I got a chance to really get out there. So there were not, I had a couple, I would say, informal home visits. We had people over to our house that were from an HEF dinner, and it was great to have conversations about the direction of the district. And I've had a couple informal people that it turned into a tell us more about the district conversations, but nothing was scheduled from an actual home visit. But I did have meetings with every PTC and every PTO. I know several of you attended a meeting or two when it had the PTO meetings. Those were great to explain the non-homestead. I do want to thank the work that Stephanie Fast did, helping draft the document that was shared with our community about what this looked like. I spent a lot of time on the phone with people. Every time you talk to somebody about the non-homestead, it turned into, hey, tell us more about what you're doing here. So it was a great conversation piece. Get a chance to meet people and talk to people. We had meetings at every staff meeting and went from there. And then also had listening tours throughout the district. So Ann Armstrong and I did listening tours of every staff at every building, as well as 2 administrator groups, the secondary and the elementary, and get a lot of feedback, questions, and concerns about anything from, the bathrooms aren't always clean in our building, to there's too many dandelions in the front yard, to how important the MTSS work and the PBIS work is, and what that looks like. So here's an update on where I am. Conducted the initial interschool advisory meeting in January. I don't know if Mark's been to some, Dawn's been to some, Andrew's been to some, Barb's been to one. I don't know who was there. But included discussion on non-homestead. I really think those interschool advisory meetings, for those that have been able to attend, are very informational from our standpoint. We've got a really good group of leaders in the buildings that when there are concerns, not only do they come to those meetings and express them and feel comfortable, but they also have no problem picking up the phone and giving me a call because of a relationship to say, hey, can you tell us more about the playground equipment that's going in over here, or those kind of concerns. So those have been very helpful. See just some other actions. Continue the interschool advisory. We talked about the listening tours. Do we continue to do them once a year, twice a year? We still have many pages of documents to try to cipher through, so we're working on those. So Ann and I are meeting this summer to talk more about what that looks like moving forward. I think they've been very helpful, but I want to make sure there's action behind it, not just, hey, thanks for your feedback, and then we walk away. So want to continue those. And then the one thing that continues to come up once the field house opened is they think that we're done with our 2019 bond, which if you go over to Park Elementary, if you look at over at Bowers parking lot or the high school, you know it's not done. ECC is going through changes. But people are asking, what's next? What's next? And I think as a board, we need to have that conversation about not only what is next, but when is next, and how much can is available when that happens, and go from there. So though that was probably the number one question that came out is, when are we doing this? When are we doing this? And I will tell you that almost to a T, every person I talked to had a different idea of what to do next, which is fine. We could probably come up with over $3 billion worth of stuff to do, but we're not going to be able to generate that kind of money. So that was one of the biggest. So continued logistical support for scheduling, conducting meetings. I do want to thank the board and your schedules. You actually have lives. This is not your job. So taking the time to be there and going to meetings and going from there. And then resources to address, that comes into, when people have concerns about why can't we do this, sometimes there are resources that we can address them. If there's an issue with wood chips on one of the playgrounds, all right, that's a different conversation than, we want to put air conditioning in our building. How can we do that? That's a little bit of a heavier lift. So some of the questions from the board, what feedback did you receive from the home visits in March and April? I talked about the not home visits, but the accessibility. I do also feel that I go to most of our events, fine arts, athletics, and I talk to parents when they're there also. Most parents, and I wouldn't say parents are comfortable approaching all the time because they're like, he's here watching kids. But there are some that are not shy at all when they want to make sure that if they have a question or concern, I can address it. So I feel like I'm out in the community enough to talk to parents out there also. How many home visits did you make? I shared that just a minute ago. While gathering feedback on district celebrations or concerns from ISAC, PTO, booster meetings, have you noted any themes or concerns? There still is, number one of the comments I've heard at multiple PTO meetings was, what are we doing with the diversity work? And I know we've had the conversations here, and I can relay the information that for the last 2 years, we've been doing X, Y, and Z. Here's where we are. I feel like we're making good progress. I will address that in the next goal here. But so that is one thing that came up. The growth of the district. There are still people that believe we have 1,000 kindergartners coming in next year. If we did, Pat would not have a budget concern at all, the deficit going from there. So those are still conversations about what some of the biggest concerns with our district. And there's always a question about communication, about how, we didn't hear this, we didn't know this. It doesn't matter if it's social media, our website, Appleseed, emails from me. They want more, and they want consistent communication. So it's not that Mandy's using a blog and Pat's using an email and I'm using the website and Amy's only using Appleseed. They want some consistency, and I think we continue to work on that as a district. And that's even talking about our SOAR goals that has to do with communication going from there. In February, March, as listed, board members were invited to February, March staff meetings. I put on there that staff meetings, we talked to building principals about that, and it didn't seem like that was the right environment for a board member to have I would say, not a sit and get meeting, but they go to meetings and then they break up into their department chair and go in from there. I do think several board members have made a phone call, knocked on the door at a building and said, hey, can I swing by today and walk the hallways or stop by? I've received many, I would say, carbon copies of an email saying, hey, I'm going to stop by Mower today. I'm going to stop by Georgetown or the high school. And hopefully they have made you feel welcome and that they're not just dropping everything because, a board member's here, but that there's that, hey, is there a time I can stop by? And I think a lot of you have been able to do that. So that's been helpful. We've had attendance at Interschool Advisory, Diversity. I know Mark and Greg, Nick's been there, Andrew's been there, Ken's been there to a DAC meeting. And then we had staff appreciation where you all had a chance to walk through and hang out with staff, shake hands, appreciate our staff. We can't do that every day, although they deserve it every day. But, yeah. Questions on goal 2?
Not really questions. I want to thank you for some of the things we did to open it up for us to attend some of these meetings and just to foster some of those relationships. And I know, for the most part, the schools that we get to visit, it's open arms. Hey, coming in, they want to show off what they're doing there. So if we can continue that going into the next school year by looking for whether it's on the rotation of PTO meetings or things like that, I think it's a great opportunity for us.
I think and I'm open to any suggestions that you have. I would never say the doors are closed. I just think there's more productive way. Like a staff meeting is not a productive way for a board member. It just doesn't feel, but PTO meetings, right? I think they love it when you're there and just listening and going from there. Or if there is an event that's taking place in the building, I think we can continue to do that. I know I want to continue to do that. I think it's really helped having conversations and even a comfort level when it's not so much a board member's here, it's, hey, next year. It's a
That's
different
what I want it
conversation.
to be. And I know
Yeah.
certain principals are really good about inviting
Yeah.
us to things, and it's about relationship
Yep.
and showing that we support the staff
Yep.
and the students. So
Yep.
the more we can do that, the better.
All right, goal 3, diversity and advocacy. Talked about supporting the diverse student population. Went through the plan, what the plan was moving forward. I'll give you just a quick update. We did, I can't thank Andy enough for her leadership on this. I know you're here. I would say this if you're not here also. She's really done a phenomenal job bringing along a diverse population of constituents also and have a common goal. I'm not saying we have all agreed on everything, but we know we're going in the right direction. We tried to land the plane, but we don't want to land it until there's a clear landing. And coming into the summer, the question was, hey, we're around. Who else wants to meet? And the answer was, nobody. And I'm not going to say nobody, but generally speaking, people are like, it's summer. So, and we're like, but we're here. And they're like, yeah, but we're not. So we will reconvene in August. I don't have the date in front of me, but I'll get the dates to the board going from there. So continue the work. I think we're in a really good place. We do feel that we would like to bring a recommendation to the board this fall. We want to do it before school got out. But keep in mind, just because we bring something in the fall doesn't mean we have to wait till the fall of 2025. But we have to have those discussions too about what that looks like. And there's been a lot of good feedback on the direction we're going. I think we're in a really good place when it comes to that. So those are so there's kind of where we are. You can kind of read through that, looking at the data. We do want to do this. I know we did this a year ago. Once we start school, we have a population of students that leave. I do want to get as much feedback as we can. I think we had 115 that left from K through 12, which is pretty standard for our district. And I think we had 28 responses last year, which was a lot. A lot of them, hey, Dad got a new job, Mom moved, whatever it is. But there are some that we want to get some feedback. So we'd like to do that again in the fall to gain some more feedback of what are the decisions people are making when it comes to moving. And does it impact this work? Because I think that's also a conversation we're looking at.
I would assume that that's also some data that's garnered when people come to the district as well. I mean, is there?
I don't know if we do that as much. I think we just take them, right?
Well, yeah. but
our counselors know the why.
Yeah.
And our building principals, a lot of times there's a story behind it. If there is a story, we do have to investigate the story before they come. You can't get expelled from another school district and just think you can come here or have discipline or attendance issues and go from there.
Yeah. I think in the future that might be interesting too, because I think that may show us how we're improving in this area.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
So that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I do know we get information about where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
So are they coming from local? Are they coming from a parochial local? Are they coming from out of state, in-state? Are they moving? Those kind of school of choice. We get that data, but that's data we have to enter into the system, not by inquiring, hey, you're new, why? Maybe that's something to look into. Let me think a little bit more about that. It's a good question. And we ask them when they leave. I mean, it would be interesting to say, hey, we're coming to you because you're doing X, Y, and Z, and that interests us. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think, from a resources needed, really the last one is when we ask for board approval, we're going to have a lot of dialogue. It's not going to be here, let's do this and run with it. But also, if we need additional resources, can the board process what that might look like? And resources could very well be time, it could be a process. There's a lot of things that could be involved in that. I don't know what they are, but that's the one thing that would be a request from the board. We had a lot of questions with goal 3. We did not have any questions. Are there any questions now? I know Dawn just asked, but are there any additional questions?
I believe there was at least one name on the board to meet this summer, wasn't there, maybe? One excited individual.
Yes,
But,
yes.
yeah, it was kind of like, well, we'll see in September, right?
Yeah, I think there was openness to it, it just, schedules didn't align for there to be a majority participation.
And like I've said in piggybacking what Dr. Vandenberg said, I've been attending probably the last 8 meetings, and you can really see, from when you would ask a question, everybody's head would go down to people actually engaging, and stuff. I think that's all very good. So.
Okay, goal number 4, construction, which we're still heavily into, and just want to kind of give you, the continued communication. This is a little bit bigger, in my opinion, a little bit bigger goal, because it's not just about the projects we have going on, staying within budget, making sure there's timelines, making sure our students are not impacted adversely to a large degree when it comes to construction, but also what's next. And I think this is where it ties to that other goal about communications with our community. I think that's one thing as the board, when we get into maybe in the fall, maybe in the spring, as you wind down, the question is always, is not only what's next, but is there a next? And the answer could be, here's where enrollment is, and it's stagnant in different areas, or it's blowing up here and it's shrinking over here. What does that look like from a district standpoint? So we'll have those conversations, but we continue our meetings. Tomorrow morning we have another meeting with construction. Several questions arise. I will. This is not about me, but I do feel good about my involvement in the construction progress. I talked to our construction manager, and I asked, I'm assuming all districts are like this, and they said, nope, you're the only one. So I do feel it's important because I want to make sure that our community entrusts us with their funds, and we want to make sure that we're doing right. So I can't thank Pat enough for his leadership on this and his patience in dealing with me with sometimes I'm going to say this, and we've had these conversations regarding the roof at the field house. They're not everybody goes to that meeting looking forward to it. There's some anxiety because you never know what can come up. So that'll take place. Those are still continuing. And then and I'll go through this a little bit. Communicate the impact on current construction and additional opportunities for students as well as potential timeline. I'll talk about that in just a second. But then timeline to complete some of these projects. And you can see, I think we're on target for all of them. Mower Elementary is ready to go except for the parking lot. Park Elementary is transitioning smoothly. Is this wood? Yeah, we got a transition park. And they need 11 weeks to do it. We're giving them 9.5. So park kids are coming to school on August 21. Let's just hope that anyway, we're working on Park Elementary. We're getting there. It looks good. The gym looks great, but they have that, as you remember, they got to transition from half the building to the other half of the building, and this is the summer to do it. So going from there. And then the Early Childhood Center, thanks to your approval at our 2 meetings ago to get that going. Going from there. I didn't put on here the food service because you haven't approved it yet, but we'll go from there. So here's my progress. I will tell you that I think the non-homestead passing, 60 to 39, 61 to 39 with just the 4 years. And even that 2-year Headley rollback, you see that traditionally the first time through that does not pass because of the education around it. And that still passed 54 to 46, which says that people trust the work that the board's doing and that we're doing here in Hudsonville. Action taking, it talks a little bit about my action, talks about pending action, continued oversight, focus on the projects that are going on, getting ready for park, the elementary transition and completion by the fall, and then community use planning, and I'll talk about that in just a second. There's a question regarding that. I'll address it when it comes to that question. And then just continued coordination with construction architect teams, adequate funding. I do think that the board will have to have serious conversations about what this looks like moving forward. If the scope of the project in the future is too large, then do we have discussions about multiple, whether it be architects, construction firms? I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get closer to that time. Some of the work that Forest Hills has done, Kentwood has done, on the other side of the state and the larger districts, what they've done. We are in that conversation. We are one of the largest schools in Western Michigan. Our high school footprint, I believe, still is the largest school in high school in the state, from a footprint standpoint. If you want your steps, go to high school. If you want your steps, go to the north entrance, which used to be the freshman campus entrance, and swing by the field house,
Yes.
and then come back. So go from volleyball to swimming, you'll get your steps in. All right, so here's other two questions. Previous discussed, point out, sharing with board member, broader community, some of the positive indirects. This is a great question about, we open the field house, but how does that impact other facilities? If you've been by the field house this week, you realize it's packed with kids, it's packed with programming, we're utilizing those things. I think this is a great opportunity for us to use some of that to have discussions, maybe in Appleseed. I'll get with Stephanie. How can we highlight, listen, we've done this, but what else does it allow? So some of the work we're doing at ECC when it comes to the exterior and the restrooms will impact pickleball, which does not impact the district, but it impacts our community. So I think we need to share and highlight some of those components. And then what is the timing for communication with public opportunities for public use of the field house? We traditionally wait a year before we have opportunities in new facilities. Now they're using it now for community use, I would say, through Rebecca Fabiano in our community ed program. But we're talking about open gym or open weight room, open track, those kind of things. We're a little bit more time, hopefully by Christmas time, the end of the calendar year, we'll be able to have those conversations. We are still navigating a very extensive punch list at that building. We are still completing the punch list for the choir room, and it's been open for 2.5 years. But it doesn't impact the kids, but there's little things. There's a post that didn't get 2 coats of paint, so it has the number, the product number of it. Those are things that we have to address going from there. Is there something going on outside?
Yes, I'm just running.
Okay, great. I didn't know. It's like, all right, somebody ready in the evening. Do I have to be worried about something? All right. So there's any questions at goal number 4? All right, I know I'm taking too long here. I'll go quick. Communication. Review current formal and informal communication protocols, methods, specifically those related to informal and board needs, aiding decision making. So that was the goal, talking about that, work to foster relationships between the board. There was a timeline on here of April 30th, and I want to state there's 2 questions on the date. I don't think I should have put a date. I think it should be ongoing. I think that is something, but I did feel an immediacy to address this and not say ongoing. To me, sometimes I look at ongoing and says, I'll get to it later. But I think this had to be addressed right away from my standpoint. So I also went to, and I think from our entire district standpoint, I think we could have done a better job with this. So here's where the action taking. Gather initial feedback from board members regarding communication needs, expectation, understanding my role in addressing staff and board communication concerns. Monitor the effectiveness and improve communication strategies, tools for efficient communication. Those are some of the resources, tools. I also put on there training session for board members. There is a MASB offers training, which many of you have been involved in, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5. A new one just came out, and they're talking about equipping yourself with skills to build relationships and navigate challenging situations in the community. I don't know if you need that. I'm just saying those are another area that the board might also want. So there's a communicating effectively in difficult times, advanced community relations, media relations, collecting feedback, leveraging feedback. That comes out this year. So those might be areas that the board might say, you know what, I want to be involved in this also. So those are some of the things I've done. And it's probably easier if I just address some of the questions. There's several questions on this goal. So I'll address them. What future opportunities will the board be able to engage with staff and community? I think Nick asked a little bit of that. I talked a little bit about that from school advisory, DAC, the PTO meetings. If there are other suggestions that come up, like, hey, we heard about this group. Can we let me know? I want to be able to foster that for you if you feel uncomfortable or you're like, hey, can I attend this? Or maybe there's a PLC meeting at the high school with staff. You're like, hey, can I just pop around? And you're like, how do I ask? Let me know. I'll be more than happy to foster that, to get you into places where you feel like you can make informed decisions about your role as a board member going from I'm not suggesting that I would ask you to go there to make administrative decisions, but if there's something that's coming to the board, and I know that when we had the math curriculum, the bridges, several of you went into the elementary and said, show me this before I'm kind of going to vote on this. Show me what this looks like. If there are areas you want to grow in, if you want me to help support that, let me know. The timeline, I talked about that. I think it should be ongoing. I suggest updating the goal. I can update it in the document. I think if it's okay, maybe I'll talk to Dr. Hooper and say, can I just put after the date, adjust it to ongoing at the summer update. I don't want to change a document that was already shared with the board, so maybe I can just add that to it because I do think it's an ongoing goal. Can you provide some examples of how you are working to foster a relationship? I think in my opinion, I think I've done a much, a better job, but I continue to want to hear more from people that have concerns and listen, whether it's somebody that comes to a board meeting, whether it's a board member that has concerns and said, hey, whether it's a staff member that has concerns. Since we've talked about this goal in 2024, I have not heard from a board member that has concern with that or a staff member that had concerns with a board member. So I'm not saying it's been a honeymoon since January, but that has not been something that's come to my attention. If there is, and it comes to my attention, I'd be more than happy to help address it if possible. Sometimes it's not possible to navigate that, but I can help to do that. My questions are, okay, so these are, I don't think there's a question in the 4, but I think there's a question in A, B, C, D. Please provide in such details actions that you consider to be such significance that you want to bring to the board. I think the listening tours with staff and administration, those have been very significant. Those have provided a bridge between the staff and I would say administration, board, about concerns that people might have. So I think those have been very beneficial. These actions change the work relationship. I think it did because I think it continues to build trust. Every time you meet with somebody, for the most part, I'm not saying everybody, but most times when you meet with somebody and you open up that line of communication, you open up the trust, so the next time they have a concern, you might get an email from them saying, hey, we talked about this. I've had that with a couple teachers, like, hey, we talked about this. Can you look into this additionally? And here's another thing that came up. I think it adds to that. Did you see input from parties involved in this relationship exercise? I'm not sure what the question, how has this relationship improved? I don't know, I don't have a good answer. I could ask somebody to clarify the question, but I don't know that one. I don't know how to answer that one. Did those involved in the relationship building endeavor have any feedback to you concerning the results of this experience? I don't know how to answer those two. But please clarify in my notes, but.
Can I just
please
make sure those are not my questions, but so, again, made an emphasis this year since January to try to, get some of the board members out into the buildings. And if I'm hearing you correctly, we really haven't had many reports or any of concerns from the teachers and all of that. So is it fair to say, hey, by trying to be a little bit more intentional about fostering some communication that may be helping?
Yeah, let me, I'll address, I
just want to make sure I heard.
Can you hold on to that question? Yeah. Because I want to address that question.
Yeah.
But I want to see if it's, well, it won't be. I'll get through this in a minute. Okay, so I would say, to answer your question, I have not sought, so I'll give you, our last SOAR survey provided a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Right? And that gave me some context to where there might be concerns from community members, staff members, different members that we might have issues with, whether it be a subject area, whether it be a new idea, whether it be a person, whether it be a board, whatever. We've not sought that feedback generally this past spring to send a blanket survey out. So for me to say that everybody loves everybody right now, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I've also not heard, I've not had a staff member come to me and say, I am tired of this, are you going to address this or not? We've had a couple community members for public comment at board members, at board meetings, address board members. I've had conversations with some of them to talk about the work that we are continuing to do. And I think it's getting, in my opinion, I think it's getting better. we also don't have 67 people comment at board meetings. And I'm not suggesting you don't comment at board meetings, so please don't misunderstand that we're closing down public comment. But I think that has dictated a lot of the narrative also.
No, that's great, and I think it goes back to, Mark, I remember months ago you making the comments. It's easier to meet somebody when you actually sit down and have a conversation with them, hash things out. Most people are fairly agreeable. I'm paraphrasing what you've said, but I think that speaks to it, and I know I've shared with a couple of board members things that have been said to me by some staff in passing. Hey, you know, so-and-so on the board, boy, I really am growing to appreciate their perspective on things that has changed. So hopefully there are people, again, we're not all perfect, we're all going to be best friends, but you know, there's been a concerted effort, I think, your part, our part, to try to
I think a couple things.
model some things.
Yeah, I do think, I know Mark and Ken and I went to the ISD and had conversations about having difficult conversations. And really, the number one component is understand where somebody is at. You don't have to agree with their position, but it's a lot better to respect their position, what they have going from there. So I think that's helped, in my opinion.
For sure.
How have these experiences improved your performance as a leader? I believe, I don't know how to answer this based on experiences, but I believe I have a strong relationship with our staff and our community. I'm not saying everybody loves me. I get that part, because not every decision makes everybody happy. But I think overarching, I am using the last SOAR data that I'm going to say approval rating, even though it's not called that, is consistent where it was 3 years prior to COVID. We were going through this. So I think overarching, I think my experience are continuing, and I think this is just making me stronger, having more conversations, meeting more people out there, having deeper conversations with people, so that we can navigate any noise that comes our way. Do I think we will have more noise come our way? Probably. But I also know that I think we're more equipped to be patient, understanding, and listen more when we go through that noise. Hopefully not another pandemic, but you know what I mean. Are you aware of an outstanding relationship issues? I mentioned that, not to my knowledge, since I've started this goal in 2024. The timeline, we talked about the April 30th. What did the assessment, there wasn't an assessment on this goal. I think the assessment is feedback from the board, from the staff, from the community. If we want to submit formal feedback and ask these questions in a survey, we can definitely have that conversation maybe in the fall. And maybe that's a good idea to say, okay, how are we doing? And going from there. I don't know if we don't do a full strategic plan survey, but maybe we look at something. I think feedback is always a good indicator on are we going in the right direction going from there. What suggested improvements did you or will you recommend regarding communication procedure? All right, I'm going to say this, and I'm not trying to, I don't want to frustrate anybody, but I do think there are times when I wish a board member would send me an email, just me, or a text and say, give me a call, because I have a question. I've never been a big fan. I'm gonna pick on a teacher here. If a teacher had a question from a parent and they email the teacher and they copy every administrator and every board member and the superintendent about a writing assignment, I think it's really hard to build a relationship. If you have a question about something, and it could very well be, you know what, that's a great question. Can you send that to everybody? Or I respond to everybody to make sure the board's on the same page. I do think there are a lot of emails that go around the board with the whole board that some will argue are decisions, and those should not include everybody as a board. There are times when I can imagine a board member might email myself and then Barb and Nick as the president and vice president. That's fine, but I can just as easily get an email from, and I've gotten them, hey Doug, can you give me a call? From Greg, can you give me a call about this? I heard this is going, we'll pick up the phone, done. It's like, okay. I think I've had conversations with many of you, and that to me I just think we accomplished. So that would be my only recommendation. And if there are things that I can do to help foster that or clean that up, I'd like to do it also. That was it regarding Goal 5. Questions? There's 2 other questions, but they're not about Goal 5.
I do think that this is one of the areas that executive in your position is that this is one of the most essential areas for you to excel at, or for any executive to excel at. And I know you have the capabilities to be able to do that. And I would just encourage you to keep on looking for those opportunities to be able to, if you see relationships that aren't, working, get in there and do something about it, because you are in a unique situation. You're the only one of your kind in this district. And
I don't disagree.
I don't say that at all to diminish what you've done, but rather this is an enhancement that can take the abilities that you have and make them even stronger.
No, I think everything I can do, I can always improve on. So I'm not taking that as I am horrible at everything.
Right.
I didn't read it that way or understand it that way.
I
I do, it wasn't.
Okay.
But I will also, 2 things I would say. Number 1, I can't fix every relationship between 2 people in which 2 people may not want to coexist in that relationship. But I also don't want to hinder it, to make it worse, right? I don't want to add fuel to a fire. I don't want to say, oh yeah, I know this. That's not my role. And I also know that I can only do so much because you also control your own narrative. And so, but that's definitely something I can continue to foster. And if there are underlying currents of something that, hey, this is going on right now and you need to be aware, I would dare say, bless you, I'm not aware of everything. Bless you.
And like I said, you have so many things that you are extremely good at. And like I said, I want to commend you for those things, but the things that, sometimes the things that are toughest for us to do are the things that we tend to shy. And I'm speaking of myself, because I know what it's like. Okay, but anyway, this is important.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we had 2 other additional questions. What resources do I not have that would help any of its goals quicker or more? I feel comfortable enough to ask the board if there's something that I might need to support any one of these goals. So the answer is I don't have any. And then what support do I need from the board? I think just open, honest, and preferably direct conversation. I am not, with all due respect, an email to the whole board about something you're not happy with me about. It's hard to read in context when I look at who it's sent to. And I'm not saying it can't happen, but it would be really nice to start with a, hey, Doug, this is going on. Can we talk? Can we have whatever? Even say, can you sit down with a couple of us and talk about this next? I don't know. That's just where I am. But to Greg's point, that's something I can work on also. That was it. I'm sorry that took almost an hour, but I wanted to make sure it was thorough and went from there.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, it's very helpful to get an update in the context on those things. Any comments, questions on any of this?
Yes, thank you, Doug, for answering the questions, continuing to recognize that some of these are ongoing goals. And I think all of us agree that being lifelong learners is all part of what this is about as well. Like Greg said, we can all make improvements. I think as a board, we took a look at ourselves when we talked about the code of conduct. And I think all of those pieces and parts are what continues to make us stronger, not only as a district, but relationally. So I appreciate that. And I have to say, I'm astounded at how much information you keep in your head and keep straight. With all the things that we talked about tonight, it's just amazing to me that one person can manage all of that. And so I
It's
appreciate
the
it.
team, just to be clear.
I know, but the recall of data and information with the help of your team is still amazing, and you all do it very well. So thank you.
Okay. Roundtable?
Can I start?
I'm looking at you.
There you are. Sorry. So we put up, Nick knows this because I received the phone call right before the board meeting. We finally put up our speed zone signs starting at Mower Elementary. And the best news is they're up. The fun news is it thinks it's a school day. So it's blinking, telling everybody to slow down at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and people are calling to complain about the speed zone. We'll get it fixed, but we put them up, and now it tells you to slow down, and it blinks, and we're putting up Forest Grove will be next. We want to make sure they're in a good spot. 5-6 building, Mower, Jamestown, Lower. Trying to think of all the build. Georgetown, maybe. We're still working on that traffic light, and that's a whole nother. And I think we're getting closer because we did an independent, and I think we're getting closer. There was a question about can we put the same traffic signal. Nick asked about the traffic signal, and I about the over at Chicago Rec how they have the blinking, and it's a great question. But because there's no divider involved, then the answer is no, because you can't cross. Some people can't cross in that short time frame. Mm-hmm. You have to jog, and not everybody jogs when they cross, and the kid in the stroller, it just doesn't work that way. So, but we're going to be able to look at, we will look at other options for people. So that's up at Mower. So if you have feedback and people are like, it's not even school and blinking, say, the district is aware, we're going to learn how to program, we'll program ourselves. And we put the whole calendar in there, so besides snow days, it works out great. And then I'm going to have the Stratosphere, which we update monthly. Stephanie Fast does an amazing job updating the Stratosphere. I'm going to ask the board if we can go to this like quarterly. I feel like we're giving you the same data every month. Something might change. If there's a major change, testing, enrollment, class counts, all of that stuff, then we will update it. But maybe if you do it like every 3 months, if there are changes that way, you can go from there. We tried this, it's been a year. We've been handing this out every month for you to look at. I've not received any, the only feedback was can we add some behavioral data, so we're working on that. I've not received this is great, I think, besides Ken, this is great, thanks for doing this. So I don't know if he really looks at it, but I don't want to waste the time on it.
I love it, but
okay.
I'd be fine for it.
So I think quarterly, if that's okay, we'll get that to the board and go from there. And besides that, I got a picture from Summer Science. There's my phone. Summer Science, they made it to the Badlands. Picture, and none of the boys had shirts on, so it must be hot. That's all I have. They look like they were
working on the bus.
What was that?
Is the AC working on the bus?
The kids would not know, but the driver would, because the bus has air in the front for the driver, and then for the kids, and the kids won't get it until they absolutely have to. But yeah, so 25 kids made it out there. So yeah, we'll see if the bus makes it through the tunnel tomorrow. What was that? No. No, we just get it. Yes, there are 20. Yes. But yeah, they go through the tunnel tomorrow. No, Wednesday. They go through over at Cathedral Spires, and they go through the tunnel. They might have to take a little air out of the tires.
It's gonna be close.
They're worried about the air. I'm worried about the air conditioning on top, but it's all right. Might come back to another bus recommendation at the next meeting. Totally kidding. They're in great hands. No, that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Nice job on the goals update. Very good, very thorough, well thought out. Just a nice job. Nice job on the budget prep. We always think the community, because we talk about budgets, but it's your support of villages and bonds and sinking fund that allows us to go through. So thank you to the community always. Student achievement, again, you hit it again tonight in curriculum. Everything is important. That's our primary goal. Yeah, I think he wants this a few years ago now, a couple years ago now, and I think it going forward is good. And there may be a couple of things that we want to, it may be worth a reach school as we go into the court as well. Not with key data, but some additional trend data information. So,
yeah, any suggestions? Let me know.
Good, thank you.
Got it? You good?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Just want to thank Nick for standing in for Barb the last couple of meetings. Thank you for handling that. And I know Barb's not here, but I want to thank her for the detail she went into ahead of time to prep for these past couple of meetings. And I appreciate the fact that she was looking up far ahead and made it clear for all of us.
Couple of things. I have a granddaughter who's involved in the Eagle Camp, I think they're calling it. She's doing math. And I quizzed her last week and she got everyone right. I think my younger grandson said I didn't give her hard enough questions. Another thing, I don't know if we put this out there or not, but I saw something on the news on Friday. Casey Glass's dad.
Stole my thunder, right?
Okay, Casey Glass's dad got put into the Michigan Coaches Hall of Fame, and he was the first coach that he never coached varsity, just all freshmen and stuff. So what a fantastic testimony that is.
We were notified about a month ago about it, so we kind of celebrated then, and then it just hit the news last week.
Yeah, I guess I didn't remember. What was his name?
Jack.
Jack, okay, there you go.
Middle school wrestling coach.
Yeah, but anyway, it was a nice little thing on the news.
Great guy.
Freshman football, middle school. I
Yeah,
mean, he's still around.
Yeah.
Doing great.
I'm glad.
Happy 4th, I can't believe it's the end of June.
Yes.
Just like to thank the board for your support. It means a lot to all of us, staff in this central office, and just staff across Michigan means a lot. Can't say enough about that. And there's a couple signatures we need Rob's going to need after the meeting. Okay. Thank you.
I just want to echo Ken's comments again. Thank you for all the work to the whole team, for the budget and everything. I mean, that's one of the things you hear about in the community continually too, is just how they want to ask about budgets and the buildings and all of that, and we can just all speak with such great confidence that we're extremely fiscally responsible, always have been, and hopefully continue to be that. So just that's a point of pride, I think, for our district as well. So there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. So thank you. I think your comment too about asking some entrance questions could be really interesting as we look at further programming, curriculum-wise, and all that. And what's currently drawing people in, but what are they looking for? I mean, always looking at competitive advantages in the space to draw students in. I know you all have a lot on your plates already, but something to consider for down the road. So, thank you all. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Don. Moved by Greg. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay. We're adjourned.
Yep.